Before we dive into healing, we need to ask ourselves, are we ready? Or am I ready as an individual? This is part 2 in a series, Readiness Conversations for Collective Healing or Group Healing. In the previous video, I spoke about anger. I spoke about how anger is a very normal, very justified emotion, that it can be functional because it can enable a whole community to mobilize, to organize, and to get some kind of action going. We also spoke about the fact that it can be very destructive, as we are seeing now, and the danger of staying stuck in rage where we get justifiably angered or enraged by something, and then we allow it to calm down, but we do nothing. We don't move into the other layers of healing. And then when we get triggered, we become enraged all over again. And so that cycle continues. I'm triggered, I'm enraged, and then I do nothing. Then I get triggered again and I'm enraged again and I do nothing again. So it just keeps us in a state of anger and being easily triggered. So in this part 2, we are talking about what is a readiness conversation. So basically, a readiness conversation is the way in which we try to identify whether a group is ready or has the capacity to step into a deeper layer of healing. In other words, it's a kind of a check-in, a kind of a diagnosis. And in that diagnosis, we are trying to find out how ready people are to have the conversation, because the conversation is going to require vulnerability. It is going to require courage. It is going to require generosity and the willingness to care for each other while we go through the healing process, right? Because these wounds run very deep in South Africa. These wounds are at the root of our identity and our sense of belonging. So there are a couple of elements that we need in a readiness conversation. First of all, we're checking, do people have the capacity to listen to each other without interrupting, without then breaking out into all kinds of inflammatory statements and insults, adding a fuel to the fire? We also want to check, and the word is, are they able to stay regulated? What we mean by that is, are they able to keep themselves, even though they are also angry, they are also triggered, they also have their own wounding, are they able to keep themselves in a state that is helpful for the situation? Are they able to compose themselves while they are angry and triggered? Do they have the capacity to go deeper? Now, sometimes people don't, and that's not wrong. And then what we understand from that readiness conversation is that other things need to happen first. What are the kinds of things that we would say need to happen first? Number one is we will realize then, this group is not quite ready to go deeper. So instead of trying to then push the conversation to go deeper, we will first start building safety. And it's quite intricate, and I don't have time to go through it in that, but that's the first thing that we'll do. We will also begin to build relationship, not only relationship with ourselves as the people running such a readiness conversation, but also relationship between the group of people who are participating in this particular conversation. We will try to get people to move from seeing themselves as enemies to seeing themselves as comrades, as people who have a common goal. And then another very important thing that we would have to do is to model behavior. We would have to role model, how do you listen to somebody when what they're saying feels for you hurtful? How do we check our own perceptions of what people are saying? Obviously, in a readiness conversation, we need to have a lot of education, and we're seeing that with what's playing out on social media. There's just such a huge need for education because people are spreading so much of misinformation. We spend a lot of time being sure that people have the right intention. So do they really come from a place of wanting to heal, wanting to grow together, and wanting to heal themselves and their community? We are very clear in a healing conversation about what the outcomes need to be. Normally, a readiness conversation, or a conversation that is readying people to go to deeper levels of healing, includes is a facilitator of some sort. Now, it doesn't have to be some professional person who's going to be charging masses and masses per hour, but somebody who's holding the space and guiding the process so that we don't do more harm than good. Readiness conversations, it's not about getting us to a level of absolute perfection where I never say anything wrong, or I never get hurt, or I never find myself being triggered. Of course, that's not possible. We are human. We are always going to have those emotions. But how do I handle myself when that happens? How does the facilitator guide the process when that happens? That's all we have time for in this particular video. In part 3 of this series, Readiness Conversations for Collective Healing, I am going to be speaking about where we use readiness conversations. Hope to see you there.